A flight attendant told a quiet black girl to give up her first-class seat for a white platinum tier flyer who looked the part. She didn't argue, she didn't protest, she simply moved to the back of the plane, calm and composed. To the other passengers, she was just a teenager in a hoodie out of place, easy to dismiss. What they didn't know was that her name was Kayla Brennan, and her father owned the very airline they were flying. By the time the plane landed, the same crew that once overlooked her would be forced to look again with new eyes and very different consequences. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe quiet strength speaks louder than hate, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell because stories like this are just getting started. The Arizona sun had just begun to dip low, casting long golden streaks across the glass walls of Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. Inside Terminal 4, the air buzzed with the usual hum of wheeled suitcases, overhead announcements, and the scent of coffee drifting from nearby cafes. Among the crowd moved a young girl with a calm, deliberate stride. Kayla Brennan, 17 years old, black and brilliant. She wore a gray hoodie, slightly oversized, with the sleeves bunched near her wrists. Her sneakers were clean but worn, and a canvas backpack rested lightly over one shoulder. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, nothing that screamed importance, and that was just how she liked it. This was Kayla's first solo trip, a reward from her father, Jonathan Brennan, after she graduated high school, top of her class. She'd stayed up the night before rereading the letter of acceptance to Stanford, still half disbelieving. But her father had believed in her from the start. That morning, he handed her an envelope with a simple smile. Inside, a first-class ticket. Not business, not economy. First. You deserve to see the world from the front, he told her, because that's where you're headed. Now she approached Gate B-17, her boarding pass in hand, and her nerves tucked neatly beneath her steady expression. The gate agent scanned her pass with a quick chirp, and Kayla offered a soft thank you before stepping down the jet bridge. The cabin was already beginning to fill as she boarded plush leather seats stretched wide across the first-class section, each one adorned with a thick blanket and a small bottle of water. Seat 2D waited for her near the window. She paused for just a second to take it in. Then she smiled. Kayla slid into the seat and tucked her backpack gently under the one in front. From it, she pulled out a dog-eared copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, the same book her grandmother once read to her when she was little. She opened it on her lap and leaned into the soft headrest, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Around her, passengers settled in white men in navy suits, women in linen cardigans murmuring about connecting flights or wine choices. A few gave her brief glances, curious, dismissive, silent. She kept reading. Then came the click of heels. Morgan Hayes, the lead flight attendant for first class, made her way down the aisle. Every strand of her honey blonde hair was pinned in place. Her smile was perfectly measured, her blouse neatly pressed. As she passed an elderly man in 1A, she beamed. "Good evening, Mr. Callahan. Blankets just there for you." At 1C, she bent slightly toward a woman in pearls. "Let me know if you'd like champagne before takeoff, ma'am." But when she reached 2D, that smile cracked. Morgan paused beside Kayla's row, adjusting the sleeve of her jacket with a quick flick. Her voice was soft, tinged with sweetness, but there was a sharpness underneath it. "Pardon me, miss," she said, eyebrows raised slightly. "Are you sure this is your seat?" Kayla looked up slowly. Her eyes were calm, steady. "Yes," she said. Then with quiet precision, she reached into the front pocket of her hoodie and pulled out the boarding pass 2D. "That's me." Morgan took the ticket. Her eyes scanned the paper, then flicked back to Kayla, then the pass again. For a second too long. Her polite smile remained, but the skepticism behind it was obvious. Kayla didn't flinch. She just opened her book again and waited. Kayla turned another page in her book, the paper smooth beneath her fingers. Morgan Hayes still stood beside her seat. The boarding pass now returned, though the doubt in her expression lingered like a fog. She had just turned to go when a voice cut through the calm. "Excuse me," came the sound of soft leather heels and the subtle jingle of jewelry. "I believe 2D is mine." Heads turned. A woman in her early 50s stood at the front of the cabin, dressed in an ivory pantsuit and draped in a cashmere shawl. Around her neck, a string of platinum pearls gleamed under the cabin lights. Her luggage designer and coordinated trailed silently behind her. Her badge, Rachel Sterling Platinum Elite, was clipped neatly to her carry-on. Morgan's face lit up with relief, as if a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. "Ms. Sterling," she greeted warmly, stepping closer. There seems to have been a mix-up. This seat was marked for you, but she turned toward Kayla, voice now projecting loud enough for others to hear. We've had a seating confusion. Kayla looked up. Confusion. Her boarding pass had been scanned. Her seat was 2D. There had been no mix-up. But Morgan wasn't finished. Would you mind stepping to the back, miss? We'll make sure you're comfortable in economy. Kayla blinked, stunned. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Morgan's eyes didn't leave hers, not demanding, not angry, just patronizing. Thank you for your understanding. Rachel Sterling remained standing near the aisle, not making eye contact. She simply waited, her hand resting on the seat as though it were already hers. Kayla's throat felt dry. She glanced around. No one said a word. The man in 2C stared at his phone. The woman in 3A glanced out the window. The gentleman from earlier, Mr. Callahan, was now pretending to read the safety card in front of him. Not one person spoke. She felt the heat rush to her face, but she refused to let it show. There was no scene, no outburst, just the sound of the zipper on her backpack. She tucked the book away, stood slowly, and stepped aside. Morgan moved instantly, waving Rachel forward with a nod. Right this way, Miss Sterling. I'll make sure your drink is served before takeoff. Rachel took the seat with a soft hum, smoothing her shawl as if the incident had never happened. Kayla walked back, past row after row of silent passengers, past the curtain dividing privilege from the rest, past the looks, some sympathetic, some indifferent, some simply blank, some. Near the back of the plane, close to the restrooms and the stale scent of cleaning solution, she found an open middle seat. She slid into it and placed her backpack by her feet. For a moment she just sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The hum of the engine was low, but inside her chest her heartbeat was louder. Then she pulled out her phone. Her thumbs hesitated over the keyboard. Just one sentence. They made me give up my seat. I didn't argue. She hit send. Then she set the phone face down on her tray table, leaned her forehead gently against the cold window, and closed her eyes. Outside, the sun had dipped behind the mountains. The world kept moving, but something inside her had shifted, and far above the cabin ceiling, someone else was about to learn exactly who they had dismissed. The seat was stiff, narrow. It creaked when Kayla shifted her weight, the metal armrests pinching her elbows. The hum of the engines blended with the low murmur of conversation around her, but inside her chest a storm was building. She stared at the back of the cracked leather seat in front of her, jaw-clenched hands resting stiffly on her lap. It wasn't about the seat. It was about how fast people had decided she didn't belong. She pulled out her phone again, thumbs flying across the screen. This time the message wasn't just a report, it was a signal. Just thought you should know. It happened. You were right. She stared at it for a second longer before hitting send. Then she turned off the screen and slid the phone into her hoodie pocket. Her fingers were trembling just slightly, rows ahead in the plush comfort of first class. Morgan Hayes strolled through the aisle with a practiced smile. The cabin lights glinted off her name tag as she poured sparkling water into crystal-clear tumblers. The earlier incident already felt like a non-event to her. She leaned into the galley where another attendant, Chelsea, was organizing pre-flight snacks. "Can you believe that?" Morgan whispered, lips curled into a smirk. "Some folks just don't understand where they fit." Chelsea glanced up, eyes flickering with discomfort. "She had a ticket, didn't she?" Morgan waved a hand. "Oh, please. First class is for professionals, not high school kids in hoodies." Chelsea didn't reply. She looked away, focusing on the pretzel bags, her silence thick with unease. Up in the cockpit, Captain Alan Reese was adjusting his headset, flipping through the final takeoff checklist when a light blinked on his console. The secure intercom line, usually silent mid-taxi. He tapped the button. "Reese here." A voice crackled through, direct and unmistakable. "There's a situation in the cabin involving a passenger. Her name is Kayla Brennan." Captain Reese froze, every part of him going still. He knew that name. The name wasn't just familiar, it was seismic. He turned slowly toward his co-pilot, Dana Michaels, who raised an eyebrow. "Problem." Alan's voice was low and even. "We've got the founder's daughter on board." Dana's hand paused on the throttle. "In economy." "Now." Dana blinked. "Wait. Jonathan Brennan's kid, as in Brennan Air's founder." Alan gave a tight nod. She was seated in first class. Someone moved her. "Now she's in row 32. Dana exhaled, and no one thought to check that name before making the switch. Apparently not. Captain Reese turned back to the console, speaking clearly into the secure line again. "Understood. We'll handle it. Quietly for now. He clicked off the channel and adjusted his mic. His voice over the main intercom came through smooth and composed. Flight crew, prepare for takeoff. Lead attendant report to cockpit before departure. Back in the galley, Morgan's smug grin flickered. She straightened her jacket and set down a tray, brushing past Chelsea with exaggerated calm. "What now?" she muttered. Chelsea just stepped back, eyes wide, watching her go. 32 rows back. Kayla didn't move. She could feel the rumble beneath her feet as the plane taxied to the runway, but her mind was miles away. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't check it yet. She just closed her eyes. She didn't need to know what her father was doing. She already knew. He'd seen her message. And when Jonathan Brennan moved, people listened. The cockpit door opened with a soft hiss, and Morgan Hayes stepped inside, wearing the same polished smile she'd worn during boarding. She expected a routine update, maybe a compliment on how smoothly the cabin had settled, maybe even a quiet note about an upgrade for Rachel Sterling. But the atmosphere inside the cockpit was far from routine. Captain Alan Reese didn't turn to greet her. He remained seated, flipping slowly through a printed passenger manifest on a clipboard. His co-pilot Dana Michaels gave Morgan a glance so brief and unreadable it sent a prickle down her neck. Morgan cleared her throat and folded her hands neatly in front of her. "You wanted to see me." Captain Allen's voice was calm, controlled, but every syllable landed like a dropped weight. "Yes, Ms. Hayes, take a seat." Morgan hesitated, her smile faltering just a breath. She slid onto the jump seat behind the pilots, her back straight, her palms now slightly damp. Alan turned to face her eyes, steady. "I want to be very clear with you about something that just came across my desk." He held up the manifest and tapped one name with his index finger. "Kayla Brennan, first-class passenger, seat 2D. Morgan nodded slowly, trying to steady her voice. Yes, there was some confusion during boarding. A frequent flyer was told. Captain Reese cut her off. She had a ticket. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. She presented it. "You moved her anyway. And now she's sitting near the bathrooms in row 32. Morgan's throat tightened. I thought there was a mix-up, Rachel." Sterling said the seat was reserved. Alan's tone dropped further, colder now. "Do you know who Jonathan Brennan is?" The name hit like a crack of thunder. Morgan blinked rapidly. The founder. The majority shareholder. The man whose name is literally on the tail of every aircraft in this fleet. Dana's fingers hovered above the controls, silent, watching her with quiet disapproval. "That's his daughter you displaced," Alan continued, without verifying her ticket, without consulting a supervisor, and while making a comment that, yes, someone overheard corporate heard too. Morgan felt her breath shorten. Her voice when it came was faint. "I didn't know." "You didn't check," Alan corrected. Silence expanded in the small space. Alan leaned in just enough to let the gravity of his next words settle deep into her chest. "You're going to walk back there. You're going to apologize. And you're going to return Miss Brennan to her original seat. Publicly, professionally, and sincerely." Morgan tried to swallow, but her throat was dry. "We're not waiting for touchdown to sort this out," he added. "Corporate is watching this flight live. They want a resolution mid-air." Morgan nodded slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Alan turned back toward the console, flipping a switch. Dismissed. She stood more awkwardly than she meant to and reached for the door. The hum of the cockpit seemed louder now. She stepped back into the aisle, smile gone, pulse hammering in her ears. Back in seat 32C, Kayla Brennan stared out the window, unaware of the brewing storm 20 rows ahead. Her headphones were in her book, untouched in her lap. She didn't see Morgan's pale face past the curtain of first class, didn't hear the whispers from the crew, but she would soon. And this time the cabin would fall quiet for a very different reason. The cabin lights had dimmed slightly as the plane settled into cruising altitude. Trays clinked softly. Headphones buzzed with in-flight entertainment. But near the front galley, Morgan Hayes stood frozen, her hands clenched tightly around the handle of the service cart. The words from Captain Reese still echoed in her ears. She had a valid ticket. Her father owns this airline. Her shoes felt heavier with each step as she turned toward the back of the plane. She smoothed the front of her uniform and began walking the long aisle, each row a gauntlet of uncertain eyes and quiet conversation. It wasn't just embarrassment now. It was fear. Passengers noticed her shift in energy. The confident stride had softened to something uncertain. There was tension in the cabin, subtle but growing. A few passengers who had seen Kayla Brennan removed from first class now exchanged glances, sensing something was unfolding. Some whispered, some watched quietly. Others who had looked away earlier now couldn't help but look again. Row 32, Kayla sat still, her hoodie pulled low, earbuds in gaze, distant through the window. She hadn't touched her book in over 20 minutes. She had felt the humiliation boil beneath her skin, but she'd kept her composure. The only message she'd sent was, "They made me give up my seat. I didn't argue." Now Morgan stood beside her. The entire cabin seemed to lean in. "Miss Brennan." Morgan began, her voice louder than necessary, forced and tight around the edges. "There's been a mix-up. We'd like to return you to your original seat in first class." Kayla blinked. She removed one earbud. Morgan's smile trembled. The silence around them was sharper now, as if the plane itself were holding its breath. Kayla didn't move right away. Her hands rested calmly on her backpack. Her expression was composed, but her voice when she finally spoke was laced with quiet strength. "So I was right to be there all along. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't angry. It was something far worse for Morgan. Truth spoken plainly." Morgan faltered. "Yes, yes, ma'am." "Your ticket was valid." Kayla nodded once slowly. Then without rushing she stood. All around her passengers straightened. Some averted their gaze in shame. A few had the decency to look remorseful. One older woman across the aisle reached for her water bottle but didn't drink. Eyes fixed forward. Kayla hoisted her backpack over one shoulder, adjusted her hoodie and turned toward the aisle and walked. Not hurried, not boastful, just deliberate with dignity. The murmurs behind her rippled like waves. A man in a suit near the emergency exit cleared his throat. A college-aged girl lowered her tray table with a soft click and whispered something to the woman beside her. No one laughed. No one looked amused. This wasn't just a seating change anymore. This was a reckoning. As Kayla passed row after row, eyes followed her, from business travelers to families. The realization sank deeper with each step. They had watched her be removed. They had said nothing, and now they were all witnesses to her return, at the curtain-dividing coach from first class. Kayla paused. Morgan fumbled to draw it open, her hand brushing the fabric with visible nerves. Kayla didn't look at her. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. Then she stepped through. This time no one doubted she belonged. And from the cockpit, Captain Reese gave a quiet nod to himself. Justice even mid-air was best served with grace. Kayla Brennan stepped through the thick first-class curtain with the weight of dozens of eyes behind her. The silence didn't break. It deepened. The leather seats gleamed under the soft cabin lights. Champagne flutes clinked faintly, but no one spoke. Not a soul questioned why she was walking back to seat 2D. Not now. Kayla didn't hesitate. She found her seat again, the one that was hers all along, and sat down with quiet poise, slipping her backpack gently beneath the seat in front of her. The thick first-class blanket still sat neatly folded atop the cushion, untouched. Across the aisle, Rachel Sterling, still clutching her designer handbag, shifted uneasily in her seat. Her pearl earrings sparkled under the reading light, but her confidence had dulled. She avoided looking in Kayla's direction altogether, her eyes fixed firmly on the untouched magazine in her lap. The same woman who had claimed the seat with absolute assurance now seemed almost childlike, small, uncertain, and out of place. Kayla didn't look at her. She didn't need to. The point had already been made. From the front of the cabin, Morgan Hayes approached slowly, clutching a drink tray like it was a lifeline. Her smile, once tight with judgment, was now brittle with nervous energy. "We're very sorry for the confusion," she murmured, placing a glass of water gently on Kayla's tray. "If you need anything at all, just let us know." Kayla gave no reply. She reached into her backpack and retrieved her book, the same dog-eared novel she'd been reading before. All of this started. With a quiet breath, she opened to her marked page and began to read as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just been forced to reclaim a seat that was rightfully hers. The pages didn't matter much now. Her eyes skimmed the words, but her mind buzzed with a quiet storm of thoughts. Sharp, clear, and controlled. No anger, no tears, just presence, just truth. Behind her, a few first-class passengers stirred. A man cleared his throat. A woman near the window adjusted her scarf. It was all normal. On the surface, but the energy had changed. The cabin air, once laced with unspoken superiority, now carried something else. Awareness. Across the aisle, Rachel continued to stare at the in-flight safety card. Her jaw clenched. She kept adjusting the strap of her handbag. Once. Twice. 3 times. She tried to project ease, but the effort was transparent. She was exposed now not by name, but by implication. Everyone in first class had seen what happened. They just hadn't said anything. Kayla could feel their glances even when they weren't looking directly at her. Some were embarrassed, some were ashamed, some were afraid they'd be next, and all of them for the first time realized how easy it was to be complicit. Kayla didn't hold it against them. Not today. Not yet. The pages of her novel rustled softly as she turned one. The only sound she allowed herself. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. But in her stillness, in her quiet return to that seat, she had reclaimed more than just a chair. She had reclaimed her space, her right to be seen, to be respected, without explanation, without exception. Far up in the cockpit, Captain Reese checked the monitors, his face unreadable, but he knew what had happened behind the curtain. And so did corporate. Back in 2D, Kayla didn't say another word. Her silence spoke louder than anything else, and everyone heard it. The cabin lights dimmed gently as the aircraft began its gradual descent into San Francisco International Airport. Seatbelts clicked into place, trays folded up, voices hushed. But the silence wasn't ordinary. It was anticipatory. At the front of the plane, Captain Alan Reese adjusted his headset and cleared his throat. He switched to the cabin intercom. His voice, always smooth and composed, now carried a sharpened undertone measured intentional. Ladies and gentlemen, as we prepare for our arrival in San Francisco, I'd like to take this moment to remind everyone aboard that Brennan Airlines is founded on a standard of excellence not just in comfort and safety, but in respect. That standard extends to all passengers in every seat at every moment. Discrimination, disrespect, or failure to follow protocol will not be tolerated. Thank you for flying with us. Then came the click, and then came the silence. Passengers glanced at one another. The message hadn't named names, but it didn't have to. Everyone in that first-class cabin knew exactly who and what he was referring to. Even in-coach whispers started to stir. The air had thickened heavy with the knowledge of an unfolding reckoning. In the galley, Morgan Hayes stood motionless. Her hands, once so precise and confident, now trembled slightly as she pressed them to the counter. Her breathing was shallow. Her eyes stared blankly at the polished chrome of the coffee machine. She had tried to hold her posture all flight long, tried to smile, tried to act like it was over, but it wasn't. The captain's voice had confirmed what she already feared. The issue wasn't behind her. It was waiting for her on the ground. Near the back of the plane, Kayla Brennan sat with her seatbelt fastened, eyes still skimming her book, though her attention had drifted. The words no longer registered. Her phone buzzed in her lap, a text from her father, Jonathan Brennan. "Stay seated. They'll come to you." Just 7 words, but they landed with the force of a command. Kayla nodded to herself, tucked the phone away, and sat straighter. She knew what that meant. He was watching, and he was moving. Somewhere outside that plane, her father, the CEO and founder of Brennan Airlines, had already set things in motion. She didn't know who would be at the gate or what they'd say, but she didn't need to. Her father's tone was clear. He wasn't angry. He was resolved. Up front, Rachel Sterling shifted in her seat for the 10th time, adjusting her pearls. Her earlier confidence had all but evaporated. She could feel the atmosphere change, no longer a quiet retreat. It was the quiet before impact. Across the aisle, Kayla remained still, calm, a striking contrast to the ripples of tension around her. The wheels lowered with a faint thud beneath the plane. The runway lights sparkled ahead like a landing strip of consequence. The plane coasted lower. Out the window, the city glistened in the early evening haze. On the ground near Gate 47, a team had gathered. Uniformed security personnel, 2 high-ranking corporate executives, and a tall man in a tailored black suit wearing a badge with the Brennan Airlines logo and the words VP of Customer Integrity. They weren't here to welcome a celebrity. They were here to make something right and to make something clear. Kayla didn't need a podium or a microphone. She didn't need to raise her voice. The truth was already coming down with the plane, and every second closer to landing made that truth impossible to ignore. The plane rolled to a smooth stop at Gate 47, the landing gear exhaling with a soft hiss beneath the weight of a tense arrival. Passengers stirred but didn't rise. Something held them in place, something heavier than the usual seatbelt sign. The soft mechanical hum of the cabin door unlocking echoed like a signal. It slid open, and the first person through wasn't a gate agent. It was Nathan Clark, Director of Customer Experience for Brennan Airlines, tall, composed and immaculately dressed in a dark navy suit. He stepped onto the aircraft with the commanding presence of someone who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. Two uniformed security personnel followed behind him, calm, professional, and focused. He paused at the threshold, taking in the rows of passengers who were now openly watching. Then he moved forward with purpose, scanning for a specific seat. When his eyes found her, Kayla Brennan sitting quietly in 2D, he gave the faintest respectful nod. "Miss Brennan," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed cabin, "we're here to escort you off the aircraft. Your father has arranged a private reception. We'll make sure everything is handled smoothly." Kayla didn't move for a beat. Then she stood slowly, her posture poised, her backpack already slung over one shoulder. The silence was complete now. No one reached for the overhead bins. No one whispered. Every eye followed her, no longer with curiosity, but with reverence. She stepped into the aisle and walked toward the front of the cabin. No glances to the side. No need. As she passed Rachel Sterling, the woman flinched ever so slightly behind her, oversized sunglasses tugging her designer shawl tighter around her shoulders like it could shield her from the shame she now felt creeping down her neck. Kayla exited the aircraft with grace, flanked by Clark and his team disappearing through the jet bridge as though entering another world entirely, one that now understood who she was. And then, without ceremony, Nathan Clark turned back. His expression was unchanged, but the weight in his voice shifted. "Lead. Flight Attendant Morgan Hayes," he said. 3 words. That was all. Morgan froze. The color drained from her face. Her mouth parted as if to protest, but no sound came out. She turned slowly, painfully toward the front of the plane. Rachel Sterling instinctively leaned away as Morgan stepped past. No longer the poised professional she had been just hours ago, but someone unraveling in real time. Nathan waited until Morgan reached the cockpit door, then gestured her to step aside in the galley just out of passenger view, but not out of earshot. Passengers heard none of the words that followed, but they didn't need to. The message had already arrived. Loudly, quietly. The seat swap. The forced apology. The captain's pointed announcement. And now this. It wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about principle. Morgan didn't return to the cabin. Not for farewells, not for drink service, not for closure. When the seatbelt sign finally chimed off and the front door opened for all the passengers, remained uncharacteristically still. They didn't rush. They rose slowly like something sacred had occurred, and to move too quickly would dishonor it. In seat 2D, now empty, the thick blanket still rested untouched, folded precisely the way Kayla had found it, a quiet reminder of who had belonged there all along. And for the first time, no one questioned it. The executive lounge at San Francisco International was quiet, tucked away behind frosted glass and warm lighting, far from the busy terminals buzzing with flight announcements and hurried footsteps. It was the kind of place where decisions were made behind closed doors. Jonathan Brennan stood near the tall windows, hands in his pockets, watching jets taxi across the runway. The door slid open behind him. He didn't need to turn to know it was Kayla. Her steps were soft but purposeful. She dropped her backpack near one of the leather chairs and walked over. Jonathan turned slowly. His face, usually unreadable in business meetings, shifted as he looked at her. Pride, and something deeper. Relief. "You all right?" he asked, his voice lower, gentler than usual. Kayla nodded. "I am now." He reached out, squeezing her shoulder. Then he motioned to the file on the glass table. "They've already started drafting the internal changes. Bias training, unannounced audits, new leadership oversight protocols, and it's not going to be for show. I'm personally signing off on every policy." Kayla looked at the documents, then at him. "Good. But don't do it for me." "I'm not," Jonathan said. "I'm doing it because this should have never happened to anyone." Across the airport, in a smaller, far less polished conference room near the staff wing, Morgan Hayes sat stiffly in a metal chair. Her uniform still immaculate, but her posture faltered. Opposite her sat a panel from the airline's HR and legal departments. The tone in the room was clinical, formal, final. The woman from HR cleared her throat. "Ms. Hayes, this is a disciplinary hearing related to a verified incident of discrimination and policy violation on board Flight 267. You've been observed bypassing standard verification procedures and making a seating judgment based on personal bias." Morgan swallowed hard. "I didn't know who she was." "That's the problem," another executive replied calmly. "You didn't need to. You should have followed procedure regardless of who she was. Silence filled the space between them. At that same moment, in the social media operations room, the communications team at Brennan Airlines prepared a carefully worded public statement. The title was bold and direct. We failed and we're correcting it. The body of the message didn't shy away from the truth. One of our passengers, a young woman who should have been welcomed and respected, was humiliated on our aircraft. We take full responsibility. This incident has sparked immediate reforms, mandatory training, live flight audits, and a commitment to transparency. Discrimination of any kind has no place in our airline, not in any cabin, not at any level. The statement was released across all platforms: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, company homepage, and within minutes it started to spread. But even faster than the official message were the passenger videos. A grainy clip posted by someone in row 6 showed Kayla quietly returning to her seat, and the moment she asked, "So I was right to be here all along." The cabin had fallen silent in that video. You could feel the weight of it. Another passenger posted a slow pan of security escorting Kayla out first with the caption, "Turns out the girl they kicked out of first class owns the name on the plane." The story went viral. News outlets began contacting Brennan Airlines within the hour. And inside the executive lounge, Kayla's phone buzzed again and again. Messages poured in, some from friends, others from strangers who had seen the clips and just wanted to say, "We saw what happened. We're with you." Jonathan saw the buzz of her screen. He didn't say anything. He just watched his daughter lift her chin slightly, take a breath, and let the world catch up. The soft hum of the ceiling fan spun above Kayla Brennan as she lay on her bed back home in Phoenix. Her suitcase remained by the door unopened. Her gray hoodie was folded neatly on the chair. In her hand, her phone vibrated with a steady rhythm. Another message, and another. Kayla scrolled slowly, eyes absorbing the flood of texts, DMs, and emails. A message from her English teacher. "You carried yourself like a leader. So proud of you." One from a classmate she barely knew. "I've been through something like that too. Seeing you stay calm gave me courage." A direct message from a stranger in New York. "I showed the video to my daughter. She said, 'I want to be like her.'" Kayla read each one in silence, her expression unreadable, thoughtful, not overwhelmed. She placed the phone down beside her and looked toward the window. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting, casting long golden stripes across her bedroom floor. Her door creaked open gently. Jonathan Brennan stepped in. No blazer. Just a simple polo and slacks, looking more like a dad than the founder of an airline. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. "You all right?" he asked softly. Kayla nodded. He took a seat at the edge of her bed. "What you did," he began, "was more than just getting your seat back." Kayla looked over, waiting. Jonathan continued, his voice steady. "You didn't just reclaim your place, you set a standard. You reminded this company and maybe this country what dignity looks like." She didn't reply, but the slight lift at the corners of her lips said everything. Across the country, the ripple effects of the incident had begun to settle into concrete consequences. Morgan Hayes, after a full internal investigation and an HR disciplinary hearing, was formally terminated from Brennan Airlines. Her behavior, documented by both passenger testimonies and video evidence, had left no room for defense. The announcement was internal, but word spread quickly. Meanwhile, Rachel Sterling, the platinum tier flyer whose sense of entitlement helped fuel the incident, faced consequences of her own. After a full review, her elite travel privileges were suspended indefinitely. The airline cited behavior that contributed to a discriminatory event and violated community passenger standards. Reforms began moving swiftly through the system. Flight crews were retrained not just on seating protocols, but on unconscious bias and equitable service standards. Mystery passengers, evaluators posing as travelers, were dispatched randomly across flights to ensure compliance. A new hotline was created for real-time discrimination reports, monitored directly by the executive branch of the airline. It didn't undo what happened, but it was a start. Kayla stood from her bed and walked to her window. Her eyes scanned the skyline as dusk settled over the neighborhood. The world felt a little different now, not fixed, but awake. Her phone buzzed once more on the nightstand. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. In the silence, she exhaled slowly and closed her eyes. Her voice had never needed to rise. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't demanded. But the world had listened anyway, because dignity doesn't always need volume. Sometimes it only needs to stand its ground. And that was enough. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Kayla never shouted, she never demanded attention, yet her quiet strength sent shockwaves through an entire airline. This story reminds us that dignity doesn't wear designer clothes, and respect should never be given based on appearance. It also reminds us that discrimination doesn't always come with slurs. Sometimes it wears a polite smile and carries a clipboard. But even in silence, justice can still rise.